The sponsor of this episode is Chadwell Supply, an OG in the multifamily industry. Chadwell Supply is the largest privately owned maintenance and repair supplier, and they deliver orders the next day from local warehouses across the United States. To find out how Chadwell Supply will make your day better, visit www.chadwellsupply.com/difference.
Hello, welcome to another episode of 8 Stories brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. 8 Stories is the go-to podcast for anyone who's interested in the multifamily space and all of the stories within and around it. So today I'm going to tell you, I'm Sharon Cauthen, and this is my co-host Jennifer Carter, and I'm going to ask you to brace yourself because today, for example, we're going to start in the middle. We're going to maybe meet a Bravo celebrity along the way. In a little game of musical chairs, we might have a bite to eat, and we're going to end with the truth. So that's a lot. But first, I want to take a moment and hear from our sponsor. Without our sponsors, we would not be able to bring this content to you. So let's pause for a word from our sponsor. All right, thank you. So today we're going to begin with the first story of our 8 stories, and this is one I call the messy middle. So I have a confession, and that is I love home improvement shows.
My confession too.
Yes. Jennifer and I are going to just be twinsies one day. We're watching on the HGTV. I love to see any kind of transformation of a home, of a building. It's just incredibly rewarding to watch the change. And I will watch the ones on HGTV. I'll also watch some of the YouTubers that they put their own content out there. So it's not about how slick it is. It's really about how great the transformation is. Because a lot of times these houses start out in deplorable conditions. And if you're in the apartment business, you have seen some deplorable conditions, I'm sure. But at the end of a half an hour or an hour-long episode, voila, you see a fully remodeled room or garden or even a whole house. So I've been known to tackle some DIY myself, and I have experienced the dreaded messy middle. You know what I mean? When you get the place is a wreck, like you've done all the demo, and all you've really succeeded in doing is destroying your space. Nothing looks better yet. You've made a mess out of things. So it is overwhelming and you feel like just giving up, but you can't give up because you just wrecked your whole place. So I think the ability to know in advance that the messy middle is coming, that there will come a time when you are fatigued by the work in the middle, is helpful in getting you to a place of being able to finish it. So for me, that means maybe before I start a project, just writing out a quick checklist of these are the things that I know I need to do. And when I get really stuck in the middle, sometimes I even will stop right then and say, okay, what are the steps I need to get out of the quagmire I'm in right now to get on to doing the next thing? So I think messy middles happen to us in all sorts of places in life. But when you do a checklist, every small victory on the way is a big win. So I don't know, Jennifer, you ever found yourself in the messy middle?
Yes, as a matter of fact, last weekend I was in the messy middle. I threw all of my kids' toys in the middle of the floor, and I thought, how am I going to get done with this? But yes, I think ultimately, the messy middle I think sometimes is difficult, but in the end, to your point, it's very rewarding when you're able to really kind of see what transformation has come from that, right? And where you started to where you finished. Sometimes it's hard to get through the messy middle, right? But when you're on the other side, or when you're on the mountain instead of in the valley, you learned a lesson or two along the way. So I don't mind living in there sometimes, not all the time.
I think it's a necessity, and you don't have to live there forever, but you do have to keep walking. Don't give up just because you get trapped in the messy middle. Our next story is one Jennifer posted about last week on LinkedIn, and the name caught my eye. So I thought I'd ask you to tell us a little bit more about the sales as a transaction of enthusiasm.
Yeah, so this actually comes from the new episode on Netflix, if anybody's been watching it. And I think in our industry, it's pretty relatable. It's called Owning Manhattan by Ryan Serhant. And I, to your point, love any kind of real estate shows, right? As you may have heard from past episodes, from myself mention, I always like to look outside the industry. And although they're selling homes, we're really doing the same thing, right? One thing in particular, and then I'll jump to this comment, but they always comment and say the primary room, right? They
Yeah.
always say the primary room instead of we say the master room, right? So just those small nuances, you can kind of pick up some great tips. But yeah, last week there was several of them, and the one that you mentioned is sales is a transaction of enthusiasm. I really resonated with me because I thought that we're not just, transacting money, right? We're not just saying, take your money and go have the square of a home and live in it. But really it's the interaction, enthusiasm that you as the salesperson or the leasing agent or whomever you want to kind of put yourself in. Hey, I'm giving and sending you with a home that has truly going to create joy and have a feeling, right? It's more than just money or a space. It's really creating a feeling, and bringing that empathy and that happiness to somebody during that, let's say, transaction of somebody joining and starting their new home. So if you haven't watched the show, watch it. I'm not the only one actually out there that has made some great comments around it. And I'll give you one so you guys can check them out. But that's Ariel Guzman. He made a great post the other day about some other great leadership value lessons that you can learn from the show. So if you haven't tuned in, tune in. You won't be disappointed.
Yeah, Ryan Serhant, people may remember him from $1 Million Listing New York.
That's right.
He's a certified Bravo celebrity. He's been around for a long time, so I'm really thrilled to see that he's branched out on his own, and that he is someone who seems to always be thinking about the next thing to do. And so, of course, they're marketing massive homes, but they have the same sort of pressure on deadlines and deliverables that we do, and they want to make their homes look nice and attract the most people. So do we. So there are some lessons for multifamily in that space.
Yeah, for sure.
We're going to move on to our third story, and this was one that Mike Brewer, who all of you know, I'm sure, from Multifamily Collective, he mentioned a Peter Drucker quote recently, and I believe that I'm not sure if this is exactly right, but strategy is a commodity, execution is an art. And it was what I took away from that was this idea that great ideas are awesome. We love great ideas, but there are heaps of really excellent ideas that are just laying in a waste bin of failed execution because that you didn't do anything with it once you had the big idea. And so great ideas are just that, they're ideas. But if you compare them with an artful execution, then you can wind up with something that is a really superior outcome to what you expected.
Makes me chuckle, Sharon, because it makes me think of the two types of people that are out there, right? Typically, you'll find somebody who's a great executioner, right? Who can really execute the vision. And then you've got these other folks who are and I'm on the execution side. I do have some strategy, but there's a lot of creative folks out there, right? And they have this creative idea, but those types of folks we need both, right? That's when you have a great team, right? If you have some great people who can be creative and that artfulness, but do you also have somebody who can execute those great ideas, right? And it made me think of kind of that yin and yang picture of having both of those to really have that superior outcome from that aspect. So I definitely agree with that.
I love the duality of that because not everybody is going to be, P.T. Barnum, and not every person who's a great tactical person is successful either because they can get trapped in executing on something that's this level when they could be at this level. So when both those personality types work together for the betterment of all, then you get a really great outcome, I think.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think I have the next one. It's called The Empty Chair. This is super interesting to me. This is one you've brought, but I'm really taken to this idea. I think we all know who Jeff Bezos is, and you mentioned here too that he has some interesting requirements to make meetings more effective. And I think you can do this virtually even, and that is one is an empty chair. Literally, this is super cool. Leaving an empty chair in the meeting space that represents the customer. A reminder that all the decisions affect the customer. And again, I think you could totally do this at Zoom, right? You pick somebody in your organization that's on the Zoom call and they have an empty chair next to them, right? And there's a sign that says customer, so everybody can kind of still see that. But man, is that a really powerful statement, right? To see an empty chair and really be always have a consistent reminder that what you're deciding on in that meeting is affecting somebody that might not be in the room.
Right.
So I love that.
I think it's a great visual. The idea that it's an intentionally left there because we want to force ourselves to ask, okay, these great decisions we're making, what is the impact on the user? And is that impact painful for them?
Yeah. Is it worse or is it better?
Right. Yeah. So a lot of times we get very, I think, divorced from that reality, especially once you leave on site. When you work on site, you can feel everything as it affects the end user. But when you get a little bit removed from that, it's easy to forget that those are real people with real lives who we are affecting.
100%. Yeah. Well, so if you see me with an empty chair, Sharon, at any meetings, you know why.
Next time you show up for this, there'll just be an empty chair. Jennifer won't be there, and I'll just be talking there.
Yeah. That's great. I love that.
All right. So we're at the midpoint of the meeting, and I want to pause just for a moment so that we can, again, thank our sponsors for today's episode. So let's hold on for one moment, please. Thank you. All right, Jennifer. The next one is a quote from a coach who's a former NFL coach, Bruce Arians, I think his name is.
Yeah, and he is an interesting. We're kind of even playing off what we just heard from Jeff Bezos, right? Of kind of their mind frame, but he has a strict rule that he says will lead to immediate termination, right? Hopefully I got your ears peaking and perking up with that statement. If you miss a football game or a recital or anything to do with your children, I'll fire you, which is a very interesting statement, right? Yeah. So Adam Brandt, a well-known leadership expert and prolific author, also says bad bosses insist that work comes first. They reward workaholism. I can't say that word. And punish outside interests, but good bosses support balance. They encourage nights and weekends off, and great bosses really expect people to put loved ones above their jobs. So it's an interesting perspective, right? Like, I'm not sure if you really dunk into that. I mean, is that effective, you think? I mean, from any of those lines or those thought process? The sponsor of this episode is Chadwell Supply, an OG in the multifamily industry. Chadwell Supply is the largest privately owned maintenance and repair supplier, and they deliver orders the next day from local warehouses across the United States. To find out how Chadwell Supply will make your day better, visit www.chadwellsupply.com/difference.
I think that it's an important statement to give people permission to put their families first. I also think that there's a balance around that. If he's an NFL coach and your child's recital is on a Sunday when your team is playing, I think they're probably still an expectation that you're at work pulling your piece of the load on that day.
That makes sense.
I think what his boldness in making that statement is to say, I expect you to make your family important, and I don't expect you to ever come to me and say, well, I had to miss my kid's ball game because of. So it's a strong statement. I would be interested to know how many people he fired for it through the years.
We don't have that.
We don't have that stat, but I like the concept because some people, me included, need permission to stop.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
So that is really helpful in that way.
Yeah, and I think I've learned that. So now as a leader, I make sure I remind people, right, that it's okay to take time, right? Like from that perspective. Right. So it is a bold statement, but it is, one to kind of get your mind thinking, I think, which isn't a bad thing.
All right, moving on to our next story, the 2 pizza rule.
Oh,
right. This is another one of the Jeff Bezos rules. I did a deep dive into some of the rules that Jeff Bezos has in place for a meeting to be truly effective. And the 2 pizza rule is a classic. It says that, meetings should never have more attendees than you can feed with 2 pizzas.
Oh, now that is interesting.
You never have more than 8 to 10 people in a meeting. It's not effective. You can't make quick decisions. You can't be nimble. If you can't feed them with 2 pizzas, that's too many people in the room.
Oh, and besides the fact that you're making me hungry, but I do love that. That's interesting. I think that is pretty effective, right? It's like that old saying, too many hands in the pot, right? You get too many voices, it's not effective. It just becomes a cluster, and you're like, what are we supposed to be doing, and what's the direction? It's simple, but pretty effective, I think, which is always great. So don't be the ninth person to enter in your conference room for a meeting. You might be kicked out. No, I'm just kidding.
Don't take that last empty chair. That's for somebody else.
Right. Exactly. Or if you go to get the pizza and the pizza box is empty, I guess you gotta come back to the next meeting.
What I love about it is that it's a really easy visual.
It is.
So to ask yourself, am I inviting so many people to this meeting because I think they should be in the room, as opposed to whether I think we can move the business forward in this meeting?
Yeah, that's a great one. But again, I think it's super simple, right? A lot of these, I think, are, very clean, easy. And I can't remember the rule. God, I should be better. The rule that we mentioned a while ago about how many words should be on your emails.
Oh,
I think it was like
9-word email.
9-word email. So that makes me think of these small, simple, clear things that we're kind of highlighting today in this episode, right? That's really tactical, but easy to remember and that are effective. So,
well, Jeff says that it promotes clear communication and fast decision making. So I think that there's a lot to be said for that smaller, more nimble group moving things quickly along.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
All right, Jennifer, we've got a conversation about meet the team pages.
Yeah, you're right. We've touched a little bit about this topic in some prior episodes, and that's residents really want a frictionless experience when it comes to leasing and paying. I think that's pretty obvious, right, to a degree. And really not even just that, I think, in an everyday life of what we do. But they really want to be seen and recognized by real people. I read something the other day, it made me just think of is like they want to be seen, heard, and validated, right? From that perspective. But yeah, Meet the Team pages really should use a storytelling style in bio. So when you're thinking about sharing who your team is and how your team is kind of made up and the personality, right? Your residents don't just want a resume recap. They don't want a list of job responsibilities. Bring life to them. I mean, if you'd ultimately really kind of dig in and do a storytelling style and strip out the kind of the top line items and dig into who you are and why you chose your profession, and even maybe a little bit, a few things about you personally, right? So that they can also relate and not feel like it's sterile or kind of like, one person on one side of the desk and one person on the other. There's creating that, I like to call it a coffee shop feel, right? Where it's like loungy, if you wish. But yeah, a little bit about who you are, what you like to do outside. And then ultimately, demonstrating that you're a human and not a robot or AI or any other forms of that. But you are really who you are, so that they feel comfortable, right? If they have a question or have an idea. So, Sharon, you're obviously a very pronounced writer, right? In that world, I would say that you love and agree that storytelling is the way to go.
I do believe strongly in it. And for a long time, I was guilty of the resume recap too, but we don't need it anymore. Frankly, everyone's resume is on their bio on LinkedIn. So yes, you need your resume if you're looking for a job, but when you're putting together a meet the team so that your customers or even associates can meet the people who are decision makers, it is so much more helpful to humanize those people as opposed to giving them authority. They have authority already. So let's make them real. And then that reality might be that they love their 2 Springer Spaniels. And you'll think, oh, I have a Springer Spaniel. We have something in common. Or they love to hike, or they like to read, or whatever it is. Just learning those bits of humanity about people makes them more relatable and can give you a point of connection might otherwise have missed. So don't worry so much about being super formal.
Yeah, I would agree.
I see some of the things that come across that people give me as like when I'm helping them with their bios and asking them those kind of personal brand or personal lifestyle questions. And yeah, I get some really fun answers from people. And boy, what do you know? That makes people feel really like that person's relatable and somebody I'd like to know.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we got to end our podcast today with the truth, right?
Yes.
You want to share a little bit about that?
Well, companies and the people in them struggle with truth, not with outright dishonesty or malfeasance, or those are blatant acts of untruth. This is the struggle with truth, is a story about perspective and humanity. So I just finished rereading Dr. Paul Kalanithi's book, When Breath Becomes Air. And I'll call him Paul, it's easier. Paul was an outstanding neurosurgeon and neuroscientist. And in the prime of his life, finishing his last bit of specialty training when they discover that he has cancer. And so he starts writing this book, and he shares his entire journey of his life for the remainder of his life. And it is a remarkable book. So when I'm at the end and I'm taking away the kernels of truth that he passed down, this really stood up to me. So on the topic of truth, he had this to say: in the end, it cannot be doubted that each of us can only see a part of the picture. The doctor sees one, the patient another, the engineer a third, the economist a fourth, the pearl diver a fifth, the alcoholic the sixth, a cable guy a seventh, the sheep farmer an eighth, the beggar a ninth, and the pastor a tenth. Human knowledge is never contained in one person. It grows from the relationships we create between each other, the world, and still it is never complete.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was really profound and made me think about the fact that sometimes we get very entrenched in our truth, because that is 100% truth to us, without really opening ourselves up to realize that everybody else in the circle has a different perspective. And so it's kind of like the idea of describing the elephant when you're all blindfolded and on different sides, and somebody's feeling the tail or the trunk or the tusk, and it doesn't feel anything like what you're feeling. So yeah, that allowance for a truth to be different from a different perspective, I think is a beautiful concept.
Yeah, it really is. And that's really a great perspective and takeaway when you think about working with several other people, right? In an office, in different positions, even with residents, right? I think that can be applicable or applied, right, into really every situation that we're in, personally and professionally. So really great
residents. I mean, yeah, we need to hear what they're saying. Just because we think we know the policy and we know the truth is on our side, we need to be wide open to hearing what they have to say about their experience. And so that's it. That's what all 8 stories today. We got through those really quickly. And thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed these 8 stories. And we will be back in 2 weeks because Jennifer is going to take a vacation.
I'm sure we'll have some great stories from that.
Can't wait for you to come back and have more to share. Until then, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you again to Chadwell Supply for sponsoring this episode. Chadwell Supply delivers unforgettable service with next-day delivery, online and in-person maintenance training, procurement platform, assistance to make your ordering simple. Visit chadwellsupply.com/difference to learn how Chadwell Supply will make your day better.